Hey guys, what's up? It's Shla coming back to ya with another episode of Car Rides with Shla, and we're off. I don't know, today I guess it was a little bit more lively. Maybe that's a good way to put it. My mind was a bit more active, I suppose, whatever that means, right? Because previously it's been a little bit not so active, but today it was really more the usual being, mad at people's lack of comprehension about things, honestly, specifically older people just having basically zero grasp on a lot of what is going on for young people and how, a lot of them don't really care. It has to do with retiring and they're just getting out. And so what we're going through doesn't really matter. So there was at some point a selfish grab, and I've talked about this before. And the reason why you don't have punishment for that is because they are the voting base. They are the largest chunk of voting base. So it's not really fair, because as young people, we can't vote in someone who's going to represent us better because there's so many more older people who are deeply ignorant. I mean, there's probably people even in Congress who are just not really... I mean, I'd like to think that isn't the case, but I think a lot of times it may not even be direct evil. It may be more ignorant evil, as I think I've explained a couple times before. So yeah, I guess I was thinking about that a lot. I'm trying to think of things that I can get excited about, or things that are probably aligned, if that makes any sense. These things are pertaining to the future, and it's a lot of controversy, but the more I think about it, the more likely and common it feels to be kind of my path and my trajectory, if that makes any sense. Just seems like it. I don't know. And my meaning for this is I've always been very stingy and very frustrated materially. I think I value things more than anybody I've really ever met. I really do value things. I like to take care of things. And I typically notice that most people don't. Most people are very sloppy. They're very haphazard. The people who are rich, it's like I don't really feel that they deserve the wealth that they have. I oftentimes get the impression that it should really be, like I've recently talked about, redistributed. Because to me, that seems like it would be a wake-up call to kind of wise people up, teach people something. But the problem is that I am realizing is it's who do you even redistribute it to? Because there's not necessarily hordes of great people to replace them. It's people who likely would enter the same situation. Although, like I think I may have addressed before, I do think a majority of people who are in poverty would just be more empathetic as a result of being in poverty. So I'm getting a little sidetracked. I've always had that darkness about and a scarcity. I mean, I'm feeling like I'm going to be on the street my whole life, and it's made me fairly stingy. It's difficult for me to give because I feel like I don't even have enough for myself. And a lot of this is mental kind of blockages because I feel like the truth is I shouldn't ever really be in a position where any of that stuff is all that problematic. I don't know. So I'm trying to process that. And the way it's manifesting is, again, this idea of what are posthumans going to do? And I believe it is the transcendence of property, because it's just not, I don't see how it's really relevant. Ownership of things, and we're sort of seeing, we have a window into humanity's ideal state, and it seems like for most humans it isn't ownership at all. They mostly gravitate to fancy foods, but those are all temporary. They gravitate to short form content, which is extremely temporary, and you don't really remember it. You don't really own the content like in the past with traditional DVDs and things, and long form videos where you engage in something and you really remember it. It's obviously a different situation going on now. Yeah, I cannot believe this area. It gets like this every time, even now. And there's no reason, I'm looking, there's no reason for traffic, but people just have their brakes on. It's just, I don't know what people do. I don't know, but it is very silly. Might cost me about 15 seconds getting home. No, I don't really care. This idea of ownership, and you think about living in like most humans, and it's not even sustainable for most humans to own things. I guess you just get into like, how have we operated for most of our existence, right? I mean, most humans didn't really own anything. It wasn't, I don't really know how else to explain it, but most humans did not really own much. A lot of these concepts are very new. I think it's very difficult for people to wrap their head around that. This idea that you can even save up to get a house. It's like, I mean, sure, we can't do it anymore, but for most of time, that's actually just kind of how things were. Like, you couldn't. And it seems like just the most logical next step for me. Because being motivated by money doesn't even make sense. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked. We're seeing that it doesn't work. And it's too primitive. Like we're past that at this point. We need to start thinking about doing things for the point of them being good, and that needs to be the motivating factor for why we do things. And AI calculates the ideal action, and we submit to that. And there's not, I mean, even when you get into, I guess this is something I thought about today, motivation as a concept is kind of a poor, you shouldn't need to be motivated to do something. You should just do the right thing. And that's been made to be confusing. It's been made to be confusing, but it doesn't really have to be much longer. It's not going to be. it's going to be very clear, though this is the right thing to do, let's do this. Ultra clear is what it's going to be. So that's where we're at, you know? That's where I'm at least. And it's basically, again, I just don't see how owning property... Like, we were always taught that owning property, like, it teaches you responsibility. And that's a good thing. But we're seeing now that the end game of that is, it's actually not. It's really not. Because, again, you see what that has ended up doing, and it actually ends up not being sustainable, and at some point things come back around, like the natural progression of things. Compounding generational wealth eventually makes it so that too much is clustered up top, and then now you have the same system as before, where we're just becoming more and more animalistic now. Things have not really improved. They did very temporarily, and I guess you could hypothetically conclude, if we could prolong the trajectory that was the case economically in the 1900s indefinitely, that could be the case. But likely that isn't feasible, and so it goes back to my point about, you know, I don't think it's feasible, right? I just don't. So what do we think? I actually think at this point more would get taught from people getting stripped of their property. I mean, you learn a lot from losing. You really don't learn much from gaining. You ever heard that before? I've heard it. It's like when you make a mistake, you learn from that. But when you do the right thing, oftentimes that does not really define you as a person or make your character very differently. Very different. What am I saying? It doesn't add to your character when you haven't needed to persevere through anything. I mean, we see this in the way we construct stories. You usually don't write protagonists that just have it all easy. It's not a very compelling story. And so there's probably merit to that, right? There's probably merit to why are we gravitated towards the types of archetypes that we do gravitate towards? Is there a reflection of what we convey in story, and then what manifests ideally in terms of human behavior? But like I said, in some ways, is the cost of living crisis necessary? Is it kind of necessary for people to recalibrate? I think it's possible. I think it could be a divine symptom that, what would people do? Well, no. I mean, I don't know. We know that things are out of hand, but I'm just saying, what comes of this contemplation? I mean, if things were all smooth sailing, I don't think I ever would have needed to think as hard. If I grew up in a previous time period, I don't think I would have as much philosophical input, if that makes any sense. just don't think I would have. Being born when I was born in a very specific timing, I think it's just given me a very just interesting perspective on things, and I'm sure I still would have had it if I grew up in the past. Maybe my life probably would have been better. But there has to be some type of timing for why someone like me was born when I was. You know, I don't know, just the analytical nature of things, how somehow I've been able to comprehend as much as I have, and it seems like nobody else does. There's so many questions that I have, and why I feel so out of place when I don't feel out of place. You know? Like I don't personally feel out of place. Like I feel like what I'm doing is what everybody should do, and it's always very baffling to me how this is where we are. And I've made my mistakes. That's for sure. But I'm hoping moving forward we've learned a lot from 2024 and 2025. I think I have, you know, grown so much, so rapidly. I honestly don't think it's going to be possible for 2026, or I would even go as far as to say any other point in my life to have the rapid growth that I had from 2024 to 2025, just as a person. I could be wrong about that, but I think 2026 will be about refinement, you know. That's really going to be the primary objective. So it all makes sense, but it is interesting how I've got to the point I've gotten to. How it feels like I put so much effort and had to really push to get here, and at the same time it seems like everything just fell into place. Is that a perceptive error from just any human feels that way, or is there something inherently unique about my experience? I kind of think a lot of humans would feel that way, because in retrospect, I guess things tend to seem pretty easy, because you don't have to actually feel the stress or the uncertainty. So in retrospect, everything, oh, well, things were actually easy. But do I really know that? Like, probably not. I think there could be, and it has seemed like that in my life, where I have to get a hold of my stress. Because most sad things in my life have been a result of internal. And the most frustrating part, and I've explained this before, is the intense maturity that I had and somehow just didn't follow through with. I mean, it's strange. Like, I've always had this back and forth between, yeah, in some ways I am and I was really mature, but then in other ways really immature. And I blew the chance at such a good life, I guess, just because of my own stresses about things. Like, it's odd. I think it's very odd, the experiences that I've had. And so it brings us to now, where we're really trying to figure things out and walk a straight path, hoping for the best, and really hoping for the future. I think basically all that I have to even care about anymore is hoping for the future. Hoping that I will do better with a more tech-heavy environment. It's possible. It seemed that way. And if things don't work out that way, then I guess I'll cross that bridge when I reach it. Wonder if there could be a lesson with that, though, too. Because is the mindset I have about the tech, is that really the evolution, or is that the same thing where I'm not just appreciating the present moment? Because that's like the main takeaway, is like I was just explaining. I feel that I had a very good opportunity to have a very good life, and I didn't end up doing that. I didn't end up having it. And yeah, I don't know. That's kind of what I think about. Is now, even though I've settled on that, oh, I'm just gonna wait for tech, and what if that's like completely missing the point again, like everything else? It's not quite as negative as the stress of learning to be homeless and fend for myself, but it's still a little bit stupid, and it's kind of in the same vein. But it's a commonality with not being able to live in the moment. I don't know. So this is another thing to just shove in here real quick. I kind of have a feeling in the future everyone will just live in minivans, basically, because they're fairly large, and it's just overall so much more affordable of a situation. And you just wouldn't even have houses or anything like that, and everybody would probably just have their own minivan, you know? Sort of compact, sort of large. That's kind of where I see humanity heading. Just like the most efficient way to function. So I'm trying to think like that, and again, how minimal possessions that is, and would that be a better humanity? It would free up a lot of real estate, and it would also cut down on emissions pretty substantially, because there'd be no more commute. Like, you would park at your job, that you work at in the parking lot, and you just proceed to live there. You know, it would probably be like shaded or something. Well, I don't know actually, because then in the winter, or it's still pretty expensive. Like yeah, it's still pretty expensive to like build a whole roof over an apartment. I'm not a parking lot. I'm not sure how much I agree with that, but it would absolutely be cheaper. I'm actually very curious to ask GPT about this vision and see what the effects of it are, because it would be very efficient. And it's not like people still couldn't do things. If anything, people could actually do more, because again, if there were no homes, there'd be so much more space for all these parking lots. And if you wanted to travel, you would just, if you wanted to go somewhere on like a vacation, it would just be in one of these parking lots. You know? And you just pull up, and there'd be a lot of extra space. I was going to say there's high rises, like buildings that it gets a little dicey, but I still think if you eliminated all homes and everybody just had a minivan, it would still be more efficient for going on vacations. And you can still have multiple story parking garages, so it's not that crazy. So I just wonder, I'm very curious. I should have asked GPT. I did not ask about the emissions difference and things like that. But yeah, I mean, in general, the idea about the work thing, it makes a lot of sense. It makes so much sense. But I think it proves, because people would really think this is crazy. Kind of why I wanted to document it, because I have a feeling that in the future, well, it already is becoming pretty prevalent that people have to live in their cars and things like that just to get by. So that's not really a new concept, but it's going to become increasingly the case. And then I think it's going to become increasingly the case that people are going to start thinking more like this. I'm just maybe like 10 years ahead or something like that, but I think living in cars is going to be huge moving forward. I really firmly believe that. Firmly. A lot of stuff is just so mental for people. It's like they couldn't imagine doing that just because of how much change it is, but they don't realize, like, if they grew up like that, it wouldn't even faze them. Because it's just like a place to sleep. I mean, you could just be out in your community during the day. You know, I don't even think... It's almost like we use homes now more than ever before. I don't even think people like resided in homes that much. I do think people went outside more, and there's all kinds of places you could go, especially with all this freed up land, you know, from a lack of houses. I don't know. It just seems kind of like a no-brainer for me. People would actually be less miserable this way. I think it's completely the future. I really do. Because you would have so much freed up land for like parks or playgrounds or community centers. Like, it's not like you would have to stay stuffed in a car all day. Like, that's not really, it's just, for if you needed privacy, you still have like a minivan with the back gutted, with no seats in the back, and you still need some privacy. But besides that, it would be a good thing for more people to just be out in public settings more often. There's plenty of fun things that you would be able to do. And again, everybody would have more money to spend because it wouldn't be tied up in a bunch of housing. But again, nobody in their right mind would listen. People are going to think I'm crazy, but I think this video and this idea, because I might delve into it more tomorrow, it could age better than any of them. I mean, I'm so serious, because if you just think about the trajectory of things and what would make the most sense, this really makes a lot of sense. And I know it sort of flies in the face, oh, well, you were saying we were going to rent cars to get to work. Yeah, well, I was still thinking, I guess, more so in the past, assuming we even have homes or apartments. You know what I mean? Why wouldn't we just park at work and then just live in the parking space? Unless after work you wanted to go out, but if you didn't want to go out, why would you waste the emissions going out? It's all so interesting to think about, isn't it? I think it is, and I think it's further in the future than what I was saying before. I do. So yeah, I'm very very intrigued by this concept, and I'm curious to see more quantitative calculations done on it. Like what the environmental impact would be and all that stuff. Because I think it's going to end up happening. There's so much liberation with that. There's so much potential for like a stronger economy again, because so much junk is not going to be tied up in housing. And yeah, I mean, you could really have, wow. And see, this is an interesting point, because if you think about in the past when architecture was better, they were able to build stuff better. Those were peasants building it. And this is kind of the same idea. Like, if you just have a vehicle and your whole life is dedicated to working, it's like a new peasantry that actually could be the dawn of a new renaissance. But it's been schla, and now it's time to buy schla. So, see you schla.